Thank you. So hi everyone, I'm very pleased to be here at ISEA to speak about a research creation project I'm working on called the Hitchcock Experience Spatial Montage Project. I have the chance to conduct this project with Nils Quaetaert from the École Polytechnique and on the behalf of two of my Ph.D. supervisors, Rémi Ronfard from INRIA and François Garnier from NSAD Lab. To start with, I will shortly introduce myself. So, my name is Rémi Sagot-Duvauroux, and I am not an artist. Next slide. Okay. I come from the cinema field. I am a movie editor, mostly in animation features and documentary films. So, as an editor, I am always in the center of reflections with artistic teams regarding structures and rhythms of narrative in construction. And 5 years ago, I started to explore the new forms of storytelling emerging with immersive technologies. So I was asking myself, how can we draw on our culture of cinema and especially of the montage to combine the explorable nature of virtual reality with the dramaturgical power of cinematographic narratives? So to dig this question, I joined the NSAD Lab to start a PhD in the frame of the SACRe program from the PSL University. So my thesis is therefore entitled, here it is. My thesis is entitled The Body-montage, the practice of montage as a narrative, discursive and poetic vector in virtual reality experiences. Which leads us to the system and the work in progress experience I am presenting today that consists in experiencing in virtual reality the emblematic plane sequence in Alfred Hitchcock's North by Northwest. So here normally there is a video. Play. Oh, no, didn't work. Okay. So, yeah. There was like a problem in the PowerPoint. Okay, sorry. Up. Okay. I will first, it's difficult to speak without video. I will first explain the artistic process, then how we turned it into an experimental protocol, and I will go through some interesting qualitative results, and we'll finish with a discussion about conceptualization of our process. So let's start with the artistic process. Okay, first, to work on like editing in virtual reality needs to find a combination of the harmonization of the body, the behaviors of the one in the virtual reality with the rhythm of the narratives. So to work on this problematic, we needed to have a drama going on. So the crop duster sequence in North by Northwest is one of the most widely studied in the history of cinema. Its montage is essential to a good understanding of the space and distances. It also highly participates in suspense, tension, and violence. The set is simple and silent elements are easy to identify. And moreover, the duration of the action is the same as the one of the character. So based on a 3D scene provided by INRIA, we virtually reconstructed the entire set and all the props, characters, and vehicles present in the scene. As a reference, we use a diagram from Raymond Bellour's film analysis. And thanks to a visual analysis and of some archive from Robert Burke, the camera positions were reproduced. So the shot scales ranging from the opening wide shot to long shots, medium close-ups, and close-up of the character were reproduced and implemented in Unity. This work enabled us to build a 9 minutes and 45 seconds 3D animated scene corresponding to the action of the original film. Then, in order to immerse the spectator into this 3D scene, we had to find how to translate the frames of the movie to a special experience specific to virtual reality. We needed to frame the experience. So we assumed that the perceptual boundaries of a continuous VR experience are based on the subject's freedom of movement in the real environment. The perimeter of the physical space tracked by the device, therefore, seems to correspond to a frame. Now we change. In the virtual environment, it defines a scaled, specialized, and oriented zone in which the subject acquires a limited walking and acting area. We therefore decide to take this zone of potential action as our frame and editing cell. We call the immersed person an immersant, and its scales here represented by the golden statues you can see. So we adapted Hitchcock's shot scales into different immersant scales in relation to the virtual environment. We have the intuition that it is these scales variations that will reproduce the distanciation effects of cinematographic editing. So after having spatially reframed the sequence, we started our process of recutting. So starting from Hitchcock's timeline that we reproduced in our system, we took some liberties and adapted regarding the spatial specificities of room scale VR. We oriented our scales on the timeline, imposing the initial gaze frame of each editing cell. The form of the cut that we propose consists in a change of scale and in the setting of the position and orientation of the spectator's point of view. By this way, the immersant is free to move his gaze through space. If he can do that, the editor can impose his or her point of view by the cuts. By this way, we explored the scale changes effects regarding rhythm and distanciation effects. For example, if I am at the same size as the character, I inhabit the representation space. Whereas if I am bigger, the character who becomes with the size of a Playmobil, for example, is now in my haptic space, engaging a new relationship to the representation. But each immersant acts differently. Some were very active, looking for the limit of the simulation, whereas some remained still watching the ongoing action. Depending on their behavior, cuts could be accepted or, on the contrary, disturbing, meaningless, and arbitrary. So if the cut takes place during head rotation, for example, it can be very disorienting. If we could control the initial gaze frame, we couldn't control the final one. So for a better experience, we therefore study how the system could react to the immersant's final gaze frame in order to adapt the cuts. That's why we created a tool that reacts to a system of cues produced by a human-computer system during the experience. It reacts to a monitoring of the immersant's head movements and eye tracking data. The cuts no longer occur at precise moments in the timeline, but only when certain precise conditions are reached. If I am moving if I am not moving my head, for example, or if I'm looking at the character for 1 second. So instead of having a cut defined in the timeline, we have a delocalized transition that may occur within a certain duration. So let's take, for example, the plane attack. In order to create a rhythmic effect, we needed to wait that the immersant to stabilize his or her gaze on the plane or on the character, but not when he's like moving his head around. So we needed to wait that the gaze of the immersant was stabilized before to launch the next small scale in front of him, in front of the character. So here you didn't have the video, but here you have a good GIF. So here you can have the point of view of the immersant and the cut when he stabilizes his position head looking at the plane. So now I will explain how I transform this editing process into an experimental protocol. So we use the HTTVI Pro AI system with tracker attached to the participant's plexus in order to record her position of body and orientation. The participant was asked to move within a square of 2.8 meter size. After having lived the experience, the participants were invited to answer a questionnaire who relates to the bodily and cognitive appreciation and feelings, the sensation of presence, the relationships to the narrative and the editing. And finally, an oral interview of about 20 minutes was conducted, allowing the participants to go into more detail about their sensations and or impressions. And the experimental protocol consists in leaving successively 2 versions of the montage. In the first one, the immersed person always remains at the same scale as the character, and we impose to him or to her the rhythm of the editing planned by Hitchcock. So between 2 editing points, the immersant can move in space, but at each cut, she is positioned and oriented like in the film shot. The second experience consists of leaving the version of the montage edited by us with the changes of scale and the system of cues reacting to the immersant's behavior. Now I will shortly speak about the interesting results we got. So with the questionnaire, we could start to validate our hypothesis that editing must be adapted. People were more absorbed. In general, people preferred our recutted version. They were more feeling that they were missing something. Participants were less frustrated and disoriented by the cuts. And finally, an interesting result was that in the Hitchcock's version, they felt more immersed in images than inhabiting a space, whereas it was the contrary with our recutted version. Which brings us to the discussion where we try to extract certain theoretical explorations. So in order the editing to be meaningful, to have an interesting aesthetic effect on the form, several rhythms must be harmonized. First, there is the rhythm of the immersants. We observe that the participants engage their perceiving body according to different dynamic oscillating between looking and exploring. Then there is the rhythm of the editing that gives a limited temporality to the action between 2 cuts. The spatial referential does not persist, which leaves only a limited time to put in relation the physical body and its virtual scale. So if the montage is slow, then she can get used to the scale of her body. She can go from perceiving an image to inhabiting a space, exploring it, building a point of view, and having the time to restabilize her gaze on an image. If, on the contrary, the montage is fast, the image does not have time to become a space. A frenetic editing may not leave the time for a behavioral response and the sense of the scale. So for the cut to be accepted as a cinematographic language, we think that before and after the cut, the immersant shall be focused on an image rather than in the process of exploring. By detecting the moments when the exploration phase ends and the body and point of view stabilize, the montage can then propose a change in response in order to create interesting effects and meaningful. So it is this morphological variability of the montage that lies the search for a form of symbiosis between the immersant that is present and acting and the editor who is absent, guiding the immersant in the narrative through the cues of the spatial montage system. To finish, our system works with implicit interactions. So what if the immersant could become aware of his or her action on the editing? What if they could explicitly act on the temporal structure of the narrative? How could it transform them into a body montage? But that's for the next paper. So thank you very much. And if you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
Merci beaucoup, Rémi.
Thank you very much, Rémi.
We can have time. So we are so lucky. Yes, we have two questions. One question over there. Non, une question là-bas. Je vais...
Interesting. Actually, I'm curious about how you know when the gaze of the immersant is stabilized. Like, how do you measure this stabilization? Is just the time that the immersant, is that it? Immersant is fixed, or but like what does it mean in your research? Like to have a fixed gaze point? Does it mean that it's that the immersant doesn't have any other thing to look in the scene? Like because it seems important for like establishing a point of cut, right? So I didn't understand this part.
Yeah. Actually, like technically, how we detect it, I have like in the system different cues, conditions to know it. I can set, for example, when because we have the eye tracking system, and when, for example, I am looking at an object, an entity, or a space for more like 1 second, I can say, okay, now it's stabilizing. And what it means. I think what I want to do with this stabilization is to like to try to make like Kuleshov effects when to have in the editing theory there is the Kuleshov effect that theorized that when there is two different images juxtaposed in time, you get new meanings of these two images. But to have these effects, you need like to have focused your attention on something before that you propose another point of view. But if I'm looking for something and I have a cut, it's all the time so disturbing. So yeah, I mean, when I'm people, I mean, everybody react differently to this. Some people are very frustrated because they finally find something to see and they get cut. So we need to find a good rhythm to these conditions. For example, if I'm stabilizing my gaze for like 2 seconds, it doesn't mean the same like stabilizing for 1 second. And with these cues, we can as well, I didn't speak about it today, but we can have different branches. For example, if I'm looking at my computer for 1 second, I will have a cut on another image that, or if I'm looking at you, for example. So we can have like branches of different possibility of editing, of making sense. So there is rhythm, there is meanings, but it's a process. It's difficult. But with this project, I think there are a lot of people that felt like the cinematographic language at the end. But it's like when you start, it depends a lot of the beginning of the experience, how you make the participants to accept that they are in like a space where they can move and act, but at the same time have the feeling that they are with a cinematographic language. So yeah, that's a research creation project. We don't have answer yet, but we try.